Hello. I have a lot of really great thoughts for you today about the ego. And if you are anything like I was up until very recently, you may not know really what the heck I mean when I even say the word ego. And you also may have some very strong misconceptions about the role that an ego can and should play in your life. So let's get right down to it, shall we? First of all, I want you to think about, what do you think of when I say so and so has a big ego? Okay, what comes to your mind when I even use the word ego to refer to somebody? So for me, I've always kind of equated the word ego with ass. So like if you said someone had a big ego, I, I wouldn't mean, okay, I wouldn't think that they necessarily had a big ass, but I would think that someone with a big ego is an ass. That was one misconception. I kind of thought of the ego as like having like a really big head. Like, woo, it might float away. The other thing that has always popped into my head when I heard the word ego is this idea from, I don't even remember which class it was in high school, where we learned about the ego, the superego, and the id. Remember those words? And if you're anything like me, you think of those words and you think, oh geez, what does that even mean? And oh my God, have I forgotten everything that I learned in high school? And how am I how am I getting by in society when I can't remember a darn thing that I learned in high school? So let's take a deep breath and let's talk about what the ego actually is. Let me resort to my notes down here for where I was going next. Okay, let's talk a little bit first about this conception that I think, and maybe it was just me, but I think there's a pretty popular conception in society that people need to get rid of their ego. Leggo my ego, really. Well, that's how we'll refer to this. Leggo the ego. That, my friends, is, I believe, a misconception. Now, about a year ago, I started to do some really intense work in core energetics, which is something that I can't speak highly enough about. I would love to talk to you about it if you ever have any thoughts on it. Well, my core energetics mentor, who happens to also be my therapist, life coach, whatever the heck you want to term you want to use, I had spoken to her and said to her, so are we supposed to be getting rid of our ego altogether? Because the ego is the thing that kind of leads to some unhealthy behaviors and thought patterns. And she said, no, you don't want to get rid of the ego altogether, because you need to be able to say to somebody if they're stepping on your toes. If you didn't have an ego and somebody were to come over here and step right on your toes, you wouldn't tell them to get off of your toes. And now, we don't want to go overboard with it and get all like up in their grill about the fact that they are on your toes, but you do want to be able to say to them in a healthy and kind and polite way, excuse me, you're stepping on my toes. So that was when I started to first have a more clear understanding of what the word ego means. In core energetics, they describe the ego as a mask, and that's also a really good word as a descriptor, I think, because think of the ego, if you think of it as the mask, then you think of it as the ego is what we want people to believe about us. It's the mask, it's the perception that we want to put on in society. It's kind of like probably very frequently it's the things that people are willing to share on Facebook. Like, this is the ego mask. This is what we want to share with people. And the core belief of the ego is that for some reason, our ego thinks that we are separate from everybody else, and that we need to prove ourselves to everybody. So that's like where I'm starting to get an understanding of what ego is. If you look up ego in the dictionary, it's not going to give you any clarification. I think it's rather confusing. Oh, excuse me. Kneeling on the floor is not a very comfortable way to film a video. I'm going to figure this out for next time. Okay. So, that was starting to help me get a better understanding of what this ego actually is. But let me tell you where it kind of like, the angels started singing and I started to understand what ego really is and how to balance it in your life. I had received an email from Brian Johnson about something. He was referring to a blog post that I had written, the one about doubters gonna doubt, dreamers gonna dream, and he had said he had said something like yay for the integrated ego. And I thought, oh my God, not only do I not know what ego really is, but I also don't know what he means by integrated ego, and I really have no freaking clue what he is trying to say to me here. That was frustrating because, I speak a lot about Brian Johnson and his work for optimal living, and I have a lot of respect for him. So the next time I was speaking with him, I said, Brian, what does it mean? What does this mean, integrated ego? So he shared with me a concept that a man named Ken Wilber came up with. And this is an analogy to a chariot. Okay, so if you think of like those Greek chariots that they used to drive back in Greek times, think of the ego. Okay, think of these like wild horses that are trying to pull the chariot in a certain direction. The horses would represent the id. The id is everything that you want, everything that like animalistic part of you that wants to just go like shove your face in a pile of chocolate and eat it all, or like any other type of animalistic tendency you might have. That's your id. The superego, if you think of this chariot and you think of the horses being the id, we'll also think of a chariot driver and think of someone sitting in the chariot. The person sitting in the chariot, think of that as like your parents telling you how to drive. That is the superego. The superego is society, it's our parents, it's the things that we've been told our whole lives that we should be doing. We, on the other hand, the chariot drivers, that is the ego. And the ego is supposed to be balancing what the id, the horses are doing, and also what the parents in the back seat are telling them to do. That, to me, when he described it that way, I finally had like bells and whistles going off. That was the first time I felt like I had a good understanding of what the id, the ego, and the superego are. No more confusion. Gone. So, this is awesome, okay? So, this is a really big concept. My legs get old. Oh gosh, this video is getting long. But I'm going to stick with it because I am committed this time to actually doing it in one take. I'm still learning how to do these video blogs, but one take we're going for this time. So that was the description of the ego. Now, how to integrate the ego into your life. This is the key point that I want to make today. To integrate the ego is to find that balance between everything that you animalistically want to do and what society is telling you you should do. But to find your ego, your healthy ego, is to live in your truth and do what you know you're meant to be doing here on this earth. And sometimes that may align with what society is telling you, and sometimes it may not. But to live there in your truth is to have a healthy ego. To be able to be within that healthy ego helps you to move forward and make changes while you're here. It helps you to put the dent that you're meant to put into this universe, um, without stepping on the people that you love and without abandoning your morals in the process. That's where the ego is healthiest, and that is where we can be happiest, is when we are balancing it in that manner. I believe that an integrated ego is also a very, very healthy part and a key part of self-love, which is something that I've been a student of for a while now, trying to figure that out. But I believe this idea of integrating any part of you into yourself and recognizing that you as a person, as a whole, are more. You're more than any of this. You're more than any ego. You're more than, well, I'm not going to go on here. I wanted to make this a short video, and again, thanks for understanding that it's a little bit longer than intended. I'm still working on these things, but I hope you got some good key points here out of today's video about the ego. I have a lot of points I'm going to be sharing with you soon about how this idea of ego integrates with service, and I can't wait to share those things with you. If today's video was helpful to you at all, and you can think of even just one person in your life that might be helped by this video, I would be very grateful to you if you would forward this on to them. I appreciate you listening and look forward to hopefully hearing from you soon in the comments. Take care. Take care then. Bye-bye now.